everybody. Here to talk about Enduro at a high level. Thanks, Reese. We've, of course, inundated all of you guys with the specifics and, the how-tos. Want to take a step back and think about the what and the why specifically, all right? So Enduro at a high level, I think a lot of you guys have heard this ad nauseum, but it is a multi-sidechain platform with a number of applications built on top of it. And so I would say the architecture, here it's like laid out a little bit, depends on two things. Number one is that every single Enduro sidechain has as a native asset Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is the gas token. And you can see that here, illustrated in the diagram. You have BTC tied to each Enduro BTC, each of the sidechain Bitcoins. And the second big part is that you have a collective that sits at the center of things that basically is administering this one-to-one native asset peg. There's actually a third part, and that's mining. Right? Enduro is incubated by Marathon Digital Holdings. This is one of the world's largest Bitcoin miners. And the reason for doing that is earn transaction fees in a Bitcoin denominated asset. So Enduro, a what, right? A multi-sidechain platform. We're extending programmability. But I think the biggest thing is that we're trying to build the infrastructure for big ideas. Doing something new, taking Bitcoin in a different direction, and specifically doing so in a way that is as Bitcoin native as possible. That's one of the biggest priorities behind this project, is extend Bitcoin, not cannibalize it. The why? We want to protect proof of work. We think that proof of work is the most decentralized of the consensus mechanisms, but we also think that it is a consensus that is at risk. If we don't increase transaction fees and find new ways to stimulate use cases, proof of work could be in jeopardy. And so we really want to stimulate new sorts of on-chain fee revenue sources, while at the same time supercharging blockchain innovation, because at the end of the day, proof of work isn't everything. The goal is to innovate. The goal is to change the way Bitcoin works and bring it to the mainstream. So talking a little bit about the stakeholders behind Enduro, one of the most important are the miners, right? We want to make a proof of work chain. We want to make something that actually protects the incentives behind Bitcoin. But the collective and Bitcoin holders are also important to aspects of it. So part of what we're doing is also trying to recruit a decentralized group of entities, much like Marathon, to try to secure that one-to-one Bitcoin peg with the main chain. Bitcoin holders, of course, and a lot of other chains are being offered yield and the promises of getting rich quick. The goal of this sidechain is really not to offer those things to Bitcoin holders. The goal is to offer them the opportunity at activity. Because fundamentally, yield does not come from a mathematical equation. It comes from activity. It comes from adoption. And so that's one of our most important goals here. It's if we stimulate more adoption, then Bitcoin holders are going to have yield, right? Because that's how DeFi works. There's interest on a loan if there are borrowers. There's not just interest on a loan because we will it to be so. It's a community for builders. Obviously, if we're extending the programmability behind Bitcoin, that must mean that we're trying to bring new builders to Bitcoin. And of course, there are retail and institutions. The apps that we build on top of these sidechains are, of course, apps that are tailored toward mainstream individuals and mainstream enterprises. The technology behind it, I'll quickly skip through this slide, but you have hybrid consensus, right? You have proof of work matched with that collective. You've got Bitcoin peg native assets, and this is probably the most important part of this slide. This is a multi-chain ecosystem. We're trying to extend Bitcoin in ways that are agnostic about the tools that developers use, and instead make Bitcoin more amenable and, let's say, more reachable by any type of developer who's familiar with any type of standard, be that in Ethereum or be that otherwise. The first sidechain that we built is called Coordinate, and Coordinate is essentially a tool to activate Bitcoin devs. It's a UTXO blockchain. It looks and feels like Bitcoin, but it has native asset issuance embedded at the protocol layer. What that means is the current narrative you hear about ordinals and runes and all of these sort of things, that there are workarounds to try to achieve what Coordinate achieves natively. And we believe in doing so, we're enabling a stack for Bitcoin experts to build. Alice, on the other hand, is an EVM sidechain, Ethereum smart contracts paired with Bitcoin security. And at the center of it, again, you have a Bitcoin peg native asset, so Bitcoin as a gas token. But the more impressive thing about Alice isn't the technology, it's the potential adoption. We're trying to simplify the ways by which people can access Bitcoin, make a developer tooling framework that most devs understand, but stimulate use cases that actually bring Bitcoin into new directions. So real-world asset tokenization is one such use case. We're talking to a whiskey distillery company in Kentucky about tokenizing their whiskey barrels, about $50 million worth of that, and we're bringing that onto Alice in order to provide an easier mechanism to fundraise. I think the possibilities here are endless. You know, this starts with whiskey. It can go into castles, it can go into real estate, it can go into any direction, because again, we're relying on a smart contract framework that most institutions can integrate. And that's in fact the most important point. Stablecoin payments are another big thing that we're trying to further. We think that payments ultimately need to happen in a stable asset, and what better place to deploy a stablecoin than on a chain backed by a Fortune 500 company. A lot of Bitcoin layer 2s are trying to peddle this narrative, but they really can't, because stablecoin issuers like Tether, like Circle, of the likes, are not really going to buy a smaller chain with a niche developing standard. DPIN, obviously that's been in the narrative a bit in the earlier part of the year. We're not as focused on it now, but if you're talking about creating crypto incentives for real world work, that's another use case that we're looking to bring onto Alice. And loyalty is of course a big one that we're actually building an app called Amuse-Bouche and piloting it in parts of Europe and the Middle East to showcase that Bitcoin can be a rewards mechanism. The differentiation, we've got industry-grade infrastructure matched with, of course, the organic utility component. We're not raising a VC, we're not raising a venture round, we're not raising or launching a token. And so because of that organic utility on a multi-chain framework, we really think these are our strengths. And in terms of the roadmap, this is a bit of an old slide, so I'll leave that out. The roadmap is, right now we're in an open beta test period. We want to move on to a mainnet period in the next few months. And yeah, happy to just answer any questions. We have a small group here, so please feel free to ask away. Yeah? Go for it.
Could you explain again the merge mining?
Sure. So merge mining is an old concept. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, it's something that came around in the early 2010s. I'm sure that others on my team would correct me on that front, but it's an old way to mine multiple side chains, multiple chains, period, at once, without any extra energy usage. And so part of what we're doing with Enduro is creating a number of different chains with a number of different technology frameworks, a number of different programmability standards, and allowing miners in one simple integration to earn Bitcoin-denominated fees from all the chains at once. So again, it goes back to the incentives behind Enduro. We're really trying to build something that is intelligible, that is easy to integrate for Bitcoin miners, but at the same time contributes to the long-term sustainability of proof of work. Any other questions? All right, yeah, go for it.
So there's so many different Bitcoin layers and also
Yeah.
other EVM categories. What's the approach is good because the incentive for users into your
Yeah. The differentiation comes with use cases. I think that when it comes to technology, and especially with Ethereum-compatible sidechains, everybody's doing that. I think somebody on my team likes to refer to it as table stakes. You got to have an EVM sidechain if you're going to make integrations with infrastructure partners simple. The differentiation comes in the types of applications that we're accelerating on top of Alice. As opposed to like the degen-focused, yield-bearing applications, we want to try to focus on things that are more mainstream related, right? Solving cross-border payment problems, making it easier to fundraise, doing a lot of different things that, again, bring Bitcoin into new directions. So as opposed to just kind of keeping it to copying Ethereum, moving on to something new and different and refreshing. Any other questions? Love the cowboy hat. All right, guys, thank you. Good call.